Good morning, everyone. We'll just take a moment to wait for the participants from F2. I think they're still on their flag ceremony. Please hold on for a while.
Well, yes, Sam. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Sir Alan. Yes po.
Clear naman.
Yes po. Clear naman po on our end.
Okay. So, test ko lang ito. Hindi mo naman, kailangan ko bang mag-video? Pag nag-video ako, mayroon bang effect sa sound?
I think wala naman po, Doc
Wala
Alan.
naman.
Opo.
Yung slide, pwede nang i-share. Practice.
Okay po. Sige po, sir.
Tapos, paki-download yung video. Yung ko lang kung kailan i-play.
Yes po, Doc.
Thank you. Hey, Bon, saan ka?
Good morning, Sir Alan. From Iloilo po ngayon.
Wala ka sa France?
Wala ako sa Good morning din po sa ating EVSU partners.
Practice na ka. Test. Ito ba yung galing sa drive?
Yes, Doc. This ano po yung Google Slides.
Sige. I-check lang yung slides kung hindi nasisira. Thank you. Check lang kung hindi sumasabog yung nakasulat. Parang may pwede nung pwede kayo mag-plan B, ipaki-download yung file tapos ang i-share niya yung PowerPoint. Save file. Try my share as PowerPoint. DSM, nakikita ba siya as full version?
Yes, sir. Kita rin po yung controls ng PowerPoint.
Yung
Yung controls po ng PowerPoint.
yeah, how about it? Okay naman. Sige, patry nga kung kayo mag-show. Okay. Tingnan lang ulit kung hindi sumasabog yung materials. Pa-adjust na lang kung meron na displays. Okay.
Okay naman po, sir. Thank you po.
Sige, okay. Thank you. Wala akong kape.
And good morning po ulit. I can see na pumapasok na po yung mga participants natin from EVSU. Good morning po ulit. And we'll take a brief pause as our participants are currently engaged by their flag ceremony. Please take this moment to prepare and we'll be back with you shortly. See you in a bit po. Also, a few reminders as we gear up for today's meeting. Please kindly take a moment to fill out the attendance forms. The link is sent via the chat section. For the house rules, keep an eye on the screen. And for our pretest, don't forget to complete the pretest if you haven't already. It's a quick way to get a gauge of what's happening today, Bob. Good morning, Sir Dennis. Good morning, Sir Tito. Good morning, everyone from EVSU.
Hello,
Opay na
good
aga.
morning. Good morning,
Good
sir.
morning, Sir
Ramel.
Ramel.
And
Thank you
to
so
the
much
DAP,
po.
team. Good morning. Patapos lang ng flag ceremony namin. Hello, Sir Tito. Good morning. Give us at least siguro mga 10 minutes again
Okay
para
po,
sa
sure
mga
po, President.
employees to engage. Yes,
Yeah, we'll
patapos
wait
lang
for
ng flag
them.
ceremony namin. Thank you, Sir Ramel.
Thank you. Thank you, Sir Dennis. Yan po, good morning po ulit. While waiting for others to join, please kindly take a moment to fill out the attendance forms. The link is sent through the chat section po. And please keep an eye on the screen for our house rules. And thank you for your attention to these details. Let's make this meeting a success together po. Ayan, everyone. I think in 2 minutes we'll start our meeting. Please prepare now. Yan, antayin lang po natin yung ilan pa po natin kasamaan from EVSU to join this call. Ayan, good morning po ulit. It's 9 on my clock. So, mag-start na po tayo. Again, good morning everyone. Good morning ladies and gentlemen, visionaries and innovators of the Eastern Visayas region and the entire Philippines. Welcome to
Yeah,
the
good
component
morning.
1, the capacity development on futures thinking and strategic foresight for Eastern Visayas State University. Our voyage into bending reality, a transformational immersion to strategic foresight. How about a virtual round of applause po? Yan, para po sa lahat ng ating participants, good morning po ulit and welcome. Yan, as we embark on this week-long online journey, yan, we invite you to join us in exploring the uncharted territories of the future. Today is not just the beginning of a webinar, it's the ignition of a transformational odyssey that will reshape the way we perceive and navigate the world ahead. So this training is not just about theory, it's a practical endeavor tailored for the EVSU community. We aim to introduce you to strategic foresight concepts and tools, enabling you to apply them in crafting a future-ready strategic plan for the university. Your inputs and insights will be the building blocks of the roadmap that will guide EVSU into the future. So let's kick off this transformative journey. At this point, it is with great honor and pleasure that we welcome the President of the Eastern Visayas State University, Dr. Dennis De Paz, and for his welcome remarks po.
Thank you.
A round of applause po.
Thank you, Sir Mel. Okay. My special morning greetings. By the way, am I audible? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. thank
Loud
you.
and clear. Yes.
So my special morning greetings to this beautiful morning, of course, most especially to our resource persons for the 5-day webinar on futures thinking and strategic foresight by the Development Academy of the Philippines. Special mention to Dr. Alan Cajes, Director Avon Sinahon, Mr. Christian Joseph De Vera, Miss Mary Angeline Villanueva, and Mr. Richmond Celadores, sorry. I would like also to greet the DAP officials, other officials, administrators, facilitators, and organizers. So I warmly welcome you all virtually to Eastern Visayas State University. Of course, I would like also to acknowledge our key officials who are present or who are on board. Our Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Lydia M. Morante, our Vice President for Administration and Finance, Dr. Benedicto T. Militante Jr.,
Morning, sir. Morning, everyone.
Vice President for Research and Development and Extension Services, Dr. Annalyn C. Espanol, and our Vice President for Internationalization and External Affairs, Dr. Danilo B. Pulma, who served as the prime mover of this futures thinking activity of the university. Campus directors, deans, academic and administrative directors, academic and administrative unit heads, to the entire faculty and non-teaching personnel across campuses who are joining us on Zoom and YouTube. A pleasant morning to us all. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Actually, this is our first day of class, opening of classes. Kaya we are excited to meet our students. And this time, we will be meeting personnel or people from DAP. So talaga what a blessing for EVSU. So Drucker and Abraham Lincoln once said, and I quote, "In an uncertain world, the best way to predict the future is by creating it." So this futures thinking activity of the university is anchored on this premise. For the next 5 days, we shall embark on a journey of exploration, delving into the realms of futures thinking and strategic foresight. Nowadays, with the changing landscape of many sectors of our society, it becomes increasingly essential for educational institutions like ours to equip ourselves, each one of us, from our key officials, our directors, heads, faculty, and non-teaching personnel. We need to have the tools and mindset necessary to anticipate and adapt to the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. So we are engaging in this futures thinking journey to envision potential future scenarios and assess implications as we move forward in an uncertain and rapidly changing world. It is of paramount importance that all of us here know how to integrate futures thinking into our daily operations in the university. At the level of top management, futures thinking is a valuable tool in strategic planning process, considering emerging and long-term trends, potential disruptions and opportunities when outlining our institutional goals and vision, bearing in mind that our collective actions and decisions can have immense long-term consequences in the future. So in the midst of the VUCA world, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, we are called upon to reinvent and recalibrate our sense of principles and disposition to be responsive leaders to challenges and opportunities at hand. That in every difficult situations, we must learn how to respond positively and innovate solutions that will translate into credible impacts to larger communities and institutions. That by learning, we become strategists and planners to better prepare a better and brighter futures for all of us, for our students, and of course, the next generation. This moment now calls for a deeper resolve to engage ourselves seriously to making decisions and finding solutions worthy of the investment our government has given us. With this in mind, I of course thank the chair of the Committee on Sustainable Development and Futures Thinking 19th Congress, Senator Pia S. Cayetano, for spearheading these noble initiatives across universities and education. Why don't we give a virtual resounding applause to Senator Pia? Okay? So talagang kung wala siya, wala tayo nito. Okay, so pasalamat tayo kay Senator Pia. And of course, I would like to take this opportunity also to thank the Philippines for organizing. You can ponder, or we can ponder as we engage in this activity. First, 20 years from now, what will our futures be? Second, what will EBSU be 20 years from now? What kind of education and services will our students need? So I'm pretty sure that no one here can predict the future, but we can create it, of course, together. So with that, I wish everyone an engaging and insightful session ahead, and let us take advantage of this learning opportunity with our resource persons. Once again, good morning, everyone. To God be all the glory. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, President Dennis. A round of applause. Yan, virtual round of applause for our very supportive
Yes,
president of
Ronel.
the EVSU. Salamat po, Sir Dennis. Yan, hindi ko na din po patatagalin. I also want to acknowledge, of course, the presence of our VPs across EVSU community. Nandyan sila Ma'am Lydia, si Ma'am Annalyn, Sir Benedicto, Sir Tito, Sir Danny, most especially. And of course, our VP for DAP-EVSU Mindanao, Sir Mark Lemuel Garcia is also here with us. Yan, good morning po, sir. And of course, our office director, Ms. Avon Senahon. Good morning, Ms. Avon. Yan, hindi ko na po patatagalin pa kasi konti lang yung time natin. I will now introduce to you Our first speaker for the week-long online webinar. Our first speaker is the Senior Executive Fellow of the DAP Council of Fellows, the Vice President of the Corporate Concern Center, the former Dean of the DAP Graduate School of Public and Development Management, the Managing Director at the DAP Center for Sustainable Human Development, and he holds a lot of other more caps on his head. So without further ado, let us all welcome our first speaker, Dr. Alan S. Cajes. A round of applause po.
Hello, Romet. Good morning. Hello, everyone.
Hello
Hi,
po,
sir.
good morning.
po. Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Morning,
Good morning, EVSU. Good morning, Dr. President Dennis Depas, and to all officials, staff,
Good morning po.
teachers, faculty members, administrators of EVSU. Okay, yung aking isang Zoom account is restarting, kaya I'm using a backup muna at this time. Okay, so let me welcome you once again to this introductory lecture on the concepts and principles of futures thinking and strategic foresight. And for this session, we have until more or less 10:30, not to complete everything. If you have any question at any point, please put in the chat box po, and then we can respond as soon as I can see the comment, or you can raise your hands later on and feel free to participate in our discussion. Okay, so we can proceed to our first slide. Okay, in this slide, mga kaibigan, you will notice that we have one organization, and this organization can be a public sector organization, let's say, or any type of public sector organization. In this context, we're talking about Eastern Visayas State University. Okay. Now, as an institution, and you know this very well, you have done your environmental scanning, or we can call it horizon scanning, in which we identify the different internal and external drivers that affect the university. So we are talking about strengths and weaknesses, which are internal to the organization, meaning to say these are within our control. And we're also talking about opportunities and threats. Basically, the opportunities and threats are those that are external to EVSU, and normally they're very difficult to handle because they are practically beyond our control. Now, given your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you can, and I have seen your strategic plan. We can actually come up with a strategic plan. We can plan for a single future in the future, or we can think about ways by which we can process the different strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, or the drivers of change. And we can imagine not just one future, but multiple futures. So for instance, you can talk about an ideal future for the university. Okay, you can also talk about a preferred future for EVSU, or a future that is better than the current one that you have, or the business as usual, or the current scenario. Okay, which means walang pagbabago 10 years from today. Or you have options like the other three possible futures that might happen. So practically what we can, what we discern in terms of futures thinking and strategic foresight is that human beings are capable of imagining future scenarios. Okay. And since it is a common competency among human beings, those who are able to practice foresight more than anyone else will also become, well, as history would tell us, they're more successful compared to other individuals who do not practice their competency on foresighting, okay, or strategic foresight or futures thinking. So again, very basic idea is that everyone has the competency, has the power to practice strategic foresight or futures thinking. However, not everyone really does this or performs this. And what we notice is that people or organizations who demonstrate strategic thinking, strategic foresight, and futures thinking become more successful compared to others. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about the overview of strategic foresight. Ramel, okay pa ba ang aking audio so far? Okay naman.
Yes po, sir.
All right. Now, when we talk about strategic foresight, we are not actually predicting the future, okay? But we are trying to imagine possible futures. So you might ask the question now, which has been asked in the past, ilan bang futures pinag-uusapan natin dito? Okay. We can talk about as many futures as possible, right? Because as far as possibilities are concerned, they are quite unlimited. However, within our limited time and limited resources, we can probably talk about more or less 4 types of future, katulad ng futures na pinakita ko sa inyo kanina. Okay. Now, the idea is not to predict, no, because we cannot predict the future, but we can imagine the possible futures, and also we can actually use tools that we practice or apply to create forecast of what might happen. In other words, although strategic foresight is not about predicting the future, but imagining possible scenarios, strategic foresight can use tools and techniques of prediction. For example, we know that with historical data, okay, we can more or less forecast what will happen in the future. No? And we call this the predetermined elements. So for example, based on historical data of the university, you know what will be the possible number of students in the next 3, 6, or 5 years in the university. So that's the power of using a tool for prediction using historical data. In strategic foresight, we call this the predetermined elements. All right. So again, we can use tools of prediction, such as analysis of historical data, in particular the predetermined elements. But in strategic foresight, we also use other driving forces, such as the wildcards and the critical uncertainties or risk, which we will discuss in detail in the next slides. Okay, so the other concept is that when we talk about strategic foresight, it's not about what to think, but rather how to think about the future. Okay, let me state that again. In strategic foresight, it's what is important is not what to think, okay, but how to think about the future. So there has to be some kind of methodology that we will use, because how to think about the future will give us more rigor in terms of the possible scenarios that we can create about the future. So for this purpose, we ask the question, what will be the tools that we use in order to think about the future? Okay, so for instance, we use the tool for planning and decision making, which is one of the values of strategic foresight. Strategic foresight gives us some semblance of an understanding what might happen in the future, and in that case, it guides our business investments, which we do today, hoping that it will benefit the organization in the future. Okay, so some of the tools for planning and decision making include or made possible by identifying the relevant driving forces. We explore interactions of these driving forces, and by driving forces, we talk about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that we have discussed in our previous slide. So those are examples of driving forces, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and threats that we have, maybe in terms of the PESAL approach, political, economic, social, technological, legal, and ethical or environmental types of driving forces. Now, the other one is we look at the relationships among these driving forces so that we can explore their interactions. Meaning to say, when we mix, for example, strengths with opportunities, or what we call the SO strategies. In strategic planning, we call this the maxi-maxi strategies. Okay, when we combine, for example, strengths and opportunities, we are actually coming up with certain strategies that will help us in our strategic planning process. So that is an example of exploring the interactions of driving forces. We compare, we combine strengths and opportunities, we combine strengths and weaknesses, strengths and threats. We also combine weakness and opportunities, and then weakness and threats. As you know, those of you who are very familiar with strategic planning process, these are the 4 key strategies that we can formulate 4 different types of strategies by combining strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So that's an example of exploring the interactions and relationships among the driving forces. Now, imagining the plausible scenarios is one of the distinctive feature of strategic foresight. So we are not just looking at the driving forces. We are not just exploring the relationships among the driving forces, but we are also creating scenarios of the future given these driving forces. So that's a key distinctive feature of strategic foresight, because you need to create scenarios based on the driving forces that you have identified. And given the data and information that we gather based on the scenarios that we create, we can now revisit our current ways or our current worldview, our current business model, and hopefully we can revise it so that we can come up with a new business model in which EVSU will be more successful in the future. Meaning to say, not the business as usual approach, but totally something innovative based on what we have. So this particular slide shows an illustration or visualizes our process of identifying the key drivers. So marami pong driving forces or drivers out there: political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors or driving forces. But the participants, you as participant, you as scenarist and futurist will have to choose which of these drivers will be or are relevant to the university. And given these driving forces, you come up now with the scenarios of the future using your organization's future radar. Now, given the timeline that you would like to use for this study. Okay, so I hope that gives us an idea what is strategic foresight. And to further deepen our discussion about this topic, okay, in the next slide, we have a discussion on strategic foresight as dealing with uncertainty. Okay, President Dr. Dennis already mentioned the VUCA world that we are in at the moment. And right now, we are, or our approach rather in dealing with the VUCA world is traditionally the historical approach. Now, we use hindsight in order to understand the driving forces. That is why, ladies and gentlemen, if you notice, most of the business courses actually uses case study approach, because the idea is that when you are presented with new situations in the future, you can make use of historical analogy or case studies, hoping that a particular case study will give you some idea on how to address a current problem or situation or opportunity that you are facing. No? Kaya, tinuturo po natin yan. And basically what we do is, when we are dealing with uncertainty, we use judgment to deal with the uncertainty. And judgment can be improved using what we call historical analogy or case studies or references in the past. Now, unfortunately, because of the different type of uncertainty that we are dealing with now. For example, we have tuna and VUCA world, which I will discuss later on. Tuna means turbulence, uncertainty, novelty, and ambiguity, while VUCA means volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and also ambiguity. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, na wala tayong precedent at wala tayong antecedent. And in that particular situation, judgment will be very difficult to make because you have no case study or historical analogy as a reference. That is why the US Air Force think tank after the Second World War, the RAND Corporation, they came up with a study on how to deal with the Cold War that happened immediately after the Second World War. It was totally something new. There is no case study that they can use as a basis for making judgment. One of the analysts of RAND Corporation, si Herman Kahn, in 1961, he founded the Hudson Institute. And in one of his studies and articles, he said that dealing with uncertainty requires what he calls strange aids to thinking. And he was referring here to the concept of creating scenarios. Okay, so since it is impossible to use case studies from the past to help you in making a decision or judgment given your tuna and VUCA driving forces or drivers of change, the alternative is to create scenarios. So for historical analogy, we use case studies, but for future types of thinking, and you are dealing with tuna and VUCA uncertainty, you need a different way of thinking, which is, for example, scenario creation. In the 1970s, Shell International Corporation applied the ideas of Kahn, and that is why Shell has survived the oil crisis in the 70s, because they used strategic foresight and scenario planning, scenario development, rather than sticking to their business as usual or traditional way of business or strategic planning. In 1972, for those of you who are familiar with the literature on environment, the Club of Rome commissioned the Massachusetts Institute of Technology to write a book about the limits to growth. And that particular book made some forecast saying that the Earth's carrying capacity will encounter an overshoot in the next 100 years. In 1975, the Development Academy of the Philippines implemented a project, and we call this the Probing Our Futures project, looking at the future of the Philippines in 2000 or year 2000, using data from the 1970s. So you can just imagine 1970s driving forces were collected, analyzed, and then based on those data, they came up with what might happen in the Philippines 2000 AD. Now in 2016, my team at DAP implemented a project, and we call this the Evolving Patterns of Philippine Settlements. And this particular research, funded by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, is basically the next phase of the Probing Our Futures project. Okay. So I was not part of the 1975 study, but I lead the team that conducted the 2016 future-oriented research of the. Now, in the next slide, we have some definitions of the concepts that we are discussing. Futures thinking refers to the theory and methods, while future studies is a study of multiple futures. So that is the distinctive, a key distinction of futures thinking or future studies in this case, because we're looking at multiple futures. And the time horizon is beyond 15 years. And one example of the method is the Delphi method, which is dependent on the experts. And we derive qualitative knowledge from the experts that we identify. Foresight, on the other hand, is a discipline related to future studies, and in particular, it uses scenarios. So the horizon of foresight or strategic foresight is 5 to 15 years. In the academy, our normal practice is when we do strategic foresighting using scenario development, our minimum timeline is 10 years. Okay, bakit 10 years? Kasi po, meron tayong other tools and techniques if our horizon is less than 10 years. So for example, strategic planning as a tool can be used in a 6-year period. So lubos-lubusin na natin. Total kung maggagawa or we go through the process of strategic foresight, it will really require some effort and resources and time, not to mention the human resources. So lubos-lubusin na natin, gawin na natin minimum na 10 years. Now, our ambition 2040 is more than 10 years, of course, as we know. Now, here are some foresight methodologies. And these methodologies constitute qualitative and quantitative techniques. All right, so in terms of rigor, we are saying that the foresight methodologies is, or methodology that we might choose is really a combination of qualitative and quantitative techniques, which makes the foresight methodologies a mixed method of research or a mixed method of study. So there are other tools and techniques that are related to insight, which is thinking about the present, and foresight, which is thinking about the future. We can use backcasting, road mapping. We can also have or use big signals and wildcards analysis. Some private businesses and even the military is using, of course, war game simulations. Trends and emerging issues analysis is something that we can use in relation to horizon scanning, or we can improve our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis using, for example, trends and emerging issues analysis. Then you can use tools like forecasting and prediction. As I said earlier, strategic foresight make use of tools of prediction using historical data or using historical analysis, but we are not limited to this particular type of tools. And if you see towards the right side, you have the scenario technique and the Delphi method. So scenarios and Delphi methods are used for longer term strategic foresight horizon. Now, in the next slide, here is an example of a method using roadmap, horizon scanning, and Delphi method. This is a project that I supervised in 2020. The Philippine Coconut Authority asked the Academy to formulate the Philippine Coconut Farmers and Industry Development Plan, or CFIDP. And this particular document or roadmap contains the directions and policies to develop and rehabilitate the country's coconut industry in the next 50 years. Now, we have different experts deployed for this project, and many of them are based in the University of the Philippines at Los Baños. Okay, the next slide is another study that we did. This is what I mentioned about the 2016 futures-oriented study that done by my team at the Environmental Management Office, or the Sustainable Human Development Program, and practically using roadmap, horizon scanning, and Delphi method. So some of the data from this study include the following. Based on this particular study, we can say for certain, or with high level of confidence, that the population of the Philippines by 2045 will reach, anong number dyan? 142 million. So yun ang example, mga kaibigan, ng paggamit natin ng tools of prediction, such as using predetermined elements or historical data to forecast, or more or less to predict what will be our population in 2045 using current and past data. Okay, so there are other forecasts based on that study. But the watershed of strategic foresight or futures thinking in the Philippines is this particular study of the Academy entitled Probing Our Futures, the Philippines 2000, looking at the population, resources, and environment. And then we came up with a collection of scenarios about the world situation and the Philippine population, resources, and environment, including health, education, and income sharing in 2080. And Dr. Corpus, the founding president of DAP, mentioned in this book that scenarios are the perspectives on the future. And there is not a single future ahead of us. In fact, there are several possible futures. So the question, therefore, is what are the futures in the future? And he said, if we can identify many possible futures, and reduce this to the probable futures, then we can select our preferred future. So if you notice, he wrote this in 1980. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the works of Dr. Corpus, you know that Dr. Corpus is a historian. He wrote a 2-volume book on the roots of the Filipino nation. So he understands that we use historical data to study the past. Unfortunately, he said also that the past cannot explain the future. And that is why we need to understand what are the possible futures in the future and reduce this to probable futures so that we can select our preferred future. Okay, in the next slide, okay, this particular slide tells us about the barriers, or the hindering factors that make it difficult to think about the future. So we know already about the concept of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So volatility is pabago-bago. It is an unstable situation with an unknown duration, but it is something that we can understand. Uncertainty is kawalan ng katiyakan. And in this case, the cause and effects are known, yet the change that is given, the change that is possible is not given. In the case of complexity or kasalimutan, some information is available, some information can be predicted, but given the volume or nature of the information, it is very difficult to process this information. So we need technology, for example, for big data analytics, because our human brain is only limited to up to probably 100 gigabytes of processing power every day, 100 gigabytes or less. Now, ambiguity or kalabuan refers to different perspectives and viewpoints. There is a confusion, what is the cause, what is the effect? There are no precedents, and we are dealing with what we call as unknown unknowns. So given this particular challenge, we need a different kind of thinking, to help us make an informed or intelligent judgment. Now, in the next slide, we continue our discussion about the different driving forces. And in the literature, you will see that the concept of turbulence, uncertainty, novelty, and ambiguity comes from the Oxbridge thinkers in the United Kingdom, while the Center for Creative Leadership use the RUPT, clustering of the driving forces, which they describe as rapid, unpredictable, paradoxical, and tangled. Then the Institute of the Future uses BANI driving forces, which means driving forces that are brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. And of course, we have VOCA, vulnerability, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And according to Johansen, in order to deal with VOCA world, we need the VOCA prime or VOCA positive prime, vision, understanding, clarity, and adaptability. So the challenge is, how can we practice VOCA positive prime to deal with the different driving forces out there? VOCA, tuna, RAPT, or BANI driving forces. Okay, and the next slide. Here we're talking about driving forces such as wildcards. Okay, wildcards are considered or are also known as outliers. They are scenarios that we can imagine. They are low probability events, and they might not happen. However, in case they happen, they will have inordinately or excessively high impact. Okay, so low probability, high powerful impact types of driving forces are called the wildcards. So examples in the literature, you have the nuclear weapons, the artificial satellites, the two world wars that we had, including the big one, the big earthquake that is expected to happen here in Metro Manila and nearby communities. Now, here is another concept, the concept of the black swan, which is actually taken from the book by Talib in 2007. Black swan is an event that is not in the radar. It has no precedent. It is improbable. It is an unlikely event that we can only identify after it has occurred or after it has happened. So some examples here are the internet, the rise of the computers, the 911 attacks, including the establishment of the Asian Development Bank headquarters. Now, I added that because I had the opportunity to discuss strategic foresight to building owners in Ortigas area, where the Development Academy of the Philippines building is located. And I mentioned to them that whatever development they have now is largely attributed to the establishment of the Asian Development Bank headquarters in Mandaluyong. No, ito yung malapit sa Mega Mall. Now, para lang para mayroon tayong little interaction, mga kaibigan. Okay, previous slide please. Sa inyong palagay, ang COVID-19 ba ay wildcard or black swan? What do you think? What do you think about the COVID-19? Is it a black swan or a wildcard? Sige, chat. Paki-chat po sa mga walang audio. Sige, anyone? Unmute, please. COVID-19.
Black swan sa akin, sir.
Black swan. Okay. May nagsasabi din na wild card. Okay. Wild card, black swan. Sige, dalawa lang namang choices natin, no? Black swan or wild card. All right. Ang sabi ni Talib, mga kaibigan, Talib was asked kung ang COVID-19 ba ay maituturing na black swan. And Talib said, it is not a black swan because we already have information about COVID-19 in the past. Okay, so remember, this particular type of virus belongs to the family of the SARS virus. So in fact, in the 1990s, there are already journal articles talking about the possibility of a pandemic, similar to the COVID-19 pandemic. By the way, ang salitang black swan, mga kaibigan, is taken from the concept in the Western world. In the West, all swan are white. Wala silang nakikitang black swan in the Western world until we discovered a black swan in Australia. So for a long time, the Western world thought that all swans are white until we had, or somebody discovered a black swan in Australia. And Talib used that as a metaphor for the book about black swans. Okay, next slide, please. Now, here are some, again, barriers or hindering factors which make futures thinking a challenging job. So we have disruptions, we have vulnerability, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity as driving forces, and we have diversity. The other one is our cognitive biases or our heuristics and blind spots. Okay, meron tayong shortcut in making judgments or decision making. Sige, para lang ma-engage ang inyong thinking process. Ano ang ginagamit ng kababaihan sa paggawa ng paghimo o judgment, mga kaibigan? Kababaihan, anong ginagamit nila to make judgments? Normally, ano yung default natin if we make judgments? Si Ma'am Lydia, intuition. Napaka-powerful yung intuition, Ma'am, no? Kita natin mga kababaihan, no? Alam nila. Intuition. Sabi ko nga, kahit malayo ka sa bahay nyo, naririnig nyo yung iyak ng inyong anak, di ba? Yan. Intuition or kutob. Okay. Yung intuition or kutob, they are not wrong per se. However, they are what we call, in a way, cognitive biases or blind spots kasi pwede siya magkamali. So, which means na when dealing with VOCA driving forces or tuna driving forces, while kutub is okay, we can use kutub. We cannot make decisions solely based on intuition. We need historical data. Thank you, Milan, Almar. So we need to combine, for example, intuition or kutub and historical data to make a better judgment. We also have limited tools. As I mentioned, our brain capacity to process data is only up to 100 gigabytes per day or less. So we need computers, powerful computers to really process big data, as we now call it, in data science and data analytics. Now, the other challenge is if you use historical data or current data, for instance, the data is not always available. And sometimes you need to make a decision or a judgment even in the absence of data. And that is a challenge. Ano magiging basihan mo? Data, kung walang data, kutub or intuition, among other things. So these are the barriers or hindering factors that make futures thinking challenging and, of course, difficult. Now, in the next slide, okay, this is just a quick exercise, mga kaibigan. And I use predictive analytics. And I asked the question, based on historical data, what is the likelihood that a strong typhoon will enter the Philippine area of responsibility in 2022? Because when I started looking at the data, in 2010, we have a strong typhoon called Juan. And for reference, for those of you who experienced Typhoon Nitang in 1984, that's 231 in terms of speed. Then, of course, you have Yolanda in 2013. 2016, we have Lawin. Ibig sabihin, wala sa 2014, wala sa 2015. And after 3 years, dumating si Rolly in 2020. And then in 2021, you have Odette. And so I asked the question, what is the likelihood that a strong typhoon will enter the Philippine area of responsibility in 2022? And in the next slide, you will see that a simple tool like predictive analytics, using Excel, can give you 3 different scenarios. Scenario number 1 is 0, meaning to say walang super typhoon in 2022. The second scenario is the forecast, which is in the middle. At ang sabi ng forecast, that's about 60% probability. So pwedeng tumama ang isang super typhoon in 2022 based on historical data. The other scenario is that you will have two super typhoons in 2022. Now, what actually happened was that in 2022, we had Henry, Josie, and Carding. So tatlo po ang tumama na super typhoons. At hindi siya naramdaman masyado ng ating mga mamamayan dahil hindi siya tumama sa mga isla or highly urbanized or areas with high density of population. In 2023, we have 3, Betty, Igay, and Gorin. Now, again, we use predictive tools and techniques. However, we go beyond these tools and techniques in order for us to practice futures thinking and strategic foresight using scenario development. Okay, in the next slide, you can even forecast more or less the number of casualties in the 3 scenarios that I created in the previous slide. So there are ways by which we make judgments based on the VOCA driving forces, and this is in the next slide. Again, we said we use heuristic devices. We have mental shortcuts or rules of thumb, for example. At ang example natin kanina, meron tayong paggamit ng intuition or kutob. Heuristic devices such as availability, satisficing, or settling for good enough solution. Okay, habang nakakatulong po sila, ay hindi ito effective way of dealing with uncertainty. Okay, so ito yung default natin. Madali nating ginagamit na mga techniques. We also practice cognitive biases, which are basically errors in judgment. Sometimes we have the tendency to oversimplify things or situations. We also have a high level of confidence. Sometimes overconfidence, akala natin na kaya natin yan, kaya natin yan kung darating man yan. And then you have the bandwagon effect, kung anong sinabi nung iba ay sunod na lang lahat. Another approach is wait for information and then wait and see attitude. Now again, these are coping mechanisms when dealing with uncertainty, and business schools or leadership and management practices and theory tells us that these are not the correct ways of dealing with uncertainty. So there has to be a better way of coping with or dealing with uncertainty. Okay, next slide. So this is an example of, or a challenge to us, how to deal with uncertainty. Sabi ni J. Cascio, mga kaibigan, futures thinking can be understood as an immune system for our civilization. Okay, so based on sa initial concepts na pinag-uusapan natin, bakit po kaya sinabi ni Cascio that we can consider strategic foresight or futures thinking as an immune system for our civilization? So can I see ideas in the chat box, please? Bakit kaya sa inyong palagay ay sinabi yan ni Casio. Or if anyone who would like to unmute, please feel free to unmute. Bakit po kaya sinabi niya? Future's thinking can be understood as an immune system for our civilization. What do you think? Anyone? Okay. May nakasulat na ba sa chat box? Wala pa. Okay. Strengthens us from adversity. All right, thank you. Miss Stephanie. Ano pa man? Ano pa? Ano pa kaya? Ang EVSU ba ay mayroon ng ISO 9000 certification? Naka-ISO na ba kayo mga kaibigan?
Yes po.
Yes po, sir.
All right. So mayroon na kayong risk management plan. Tama? Okay. So yung risk management plan is one way of making us immune. Increasing our immunity against uncertainties or risk. So, yeah. Thank you for your comments. No? Kaganda yung inyong mga ideas dito. So like an immune system, it protects the body from potential threats. Futures thinking helps a civilization become more resilient and proactive in the face of uncertainties and disruptions. Okay, thank you. Then we have, it strengthens us from adversity, scenario making of possible failures. Yan. Kasi kung ang scenario natin is may possible failure, ang tanong, what will we do in order not to make that failure happen? This can be our lifeblood in the future. Okay, very good. Thank you sa inyong inputs. In fact, in the 1970s, now, on the left side, you see the blue marble. So this is a picture of planet Earth on December 7, 1972. This is taken from space. And remember that during this period, there was a race to the moon between the USSR and the USA. So the team USSR was ahead, one step ahead or two steps ahead. So team USA has to double time. And when NASA was flying aircrafts in space, they have to make sure that the aircrafts will survive the turbulence of space. Kasi unpredictable or napakatuna ang turbulence in space. Hindi siya katulad dito sa planet Earth as they say. So they needed wind tunnels so that they can subject an aircraft to different types of turbulence na they're trying to mimic, no, or to copy the turbulence in space so that their aircrafts will survive, and therefore the astronauts will also survive, and their mission to space will be successful. So katulad ng wind tunneling, mga kaibigan, yun din po ang ginagawa natin when we create scenarios or scenario planning or scenario building. We are actually building soft ways of wind tunnels in order to make sure that our plans, our judgments, our decisions will survive the turbulence in space, so to speak. Okay, in the next slide, this is now the difference between the traditional or conventional strategic planning approach and the planning approach or judgment or decision making using strategic foresight and scenario planning. In the past, we can say we can plan for the future, a single future. Kaya pag meron tayong strategic planning, we come up with one vision statement. a statement of a future, a desirable future that we want to achieve. But even so, hindi natin perfectly masasabi na we can actually make that future happen, because the future more or less is plus or minus 10%. May variation tayo na ganyan, plus or 10%. Minus or plus 10% variation. So again, even in the previous way of planning, when we are not dealing with VOCA and tuna driving forces, we are not 100% sure that the driving forces will lead us to a single future or the desired future that we like or that we wish to achieve. There will always be a variance, no, in terms of actual performance. So plus minus 10%. Katulad po, pag gumagawa tayo ng research, di po ba? Hindi talaga natin makuha yung 100% or seldom do we attain 100% validity and certainty. Meron talagang margin of error as we call it in research. Now, scenarios avoid the traps of prediction. How? By looking at the future in terms of the uncertainties. In the past, wala tayong VOCA world, walang uncertainties or critical uncertainties. But because of the critical uncertainties that we're dealing today, it is very difficult to say that we can plan for a single future. What is possible is we can plan for a range of futures. Okay, next slide, please. So, in scenario building, we are trying to make sense of complexity, or the scenarios that we create help in making sense of the complexity that we are dealing. So how do we do this? We look at the trends, the events, the driving forces, as we discussed earlier, and we look at we look at the relationships among these driving forces, so that we can come up with plausible stories. So story A, story B, story C, and story D. Okay, bakit natin tinatawag na story? Kasi hindi natin ma-predict 100% that the scenario A, B, C, D will actually happen. So kaya meron tayong margin of uncertainty. Sige, or we allow for variance. That is why when we talk about the future, let us say story A, B, C, and D, we're actually dealing with what we call the probable futures. Because when we deal with the future, meron tayong mga tinatawag na possible futures. And as far as possible futures are concerned, they are unlimited. So under the possible future, you have the plausible future. And the plausible future is determined by the futures triangle, which includes the pool of the future, the driving forces that are telling us that we have to create this particular future in the future. And there is also the push of the present. Marami tayong mga na-encounter ngayon na issues and opportunities that should inspire us to really move forward and create a future for the university. But at the same time, we are dealing with obstacles, hindrances, and this futures triangle will determine the kind of plausible future that you want to create. Now, in the plausible future, we have what we call the probable future, which is more likely than some other future. And then we have the preferable future. This is the future that we want to happen. This is the future that we want to happen through strategies and actions, or strategic plan and operational plan. It is a desirable future state, and this is consistent with our hopes, our dreams, and aspirations. So as Dr. Corpus would say, we need to understand what are the futures in the future so that we can determine which of the futures are probable And which of the probable futures is our preferred future? Okay, in the next slide, this is just an illustration of plausible futures. And let me just check with you mga kaibigan. Itong apat na scenarios na ito, okay, using apat na scenarios. One is work reimagined. The other one is in yellow, Uber empowered. The other one is today but turbocharged. The other one is the current state. Okay, so this is the four kinds of working in the future, or four kinds of work in the future. Sige, can I ask, in your experience sa EVSU, ano ang actual nangyari sa inyong work ngayon? What kind of work you actually have now? Is it the current state? And then full-time employment, my contract, part-time flexible work, traditional deliveries of face-to-face. Is it work reimagined? Still traditional delivery pero meron ng via platforms, meron ng contracts and tours of duty, freelancing, etc. Or today but turbocharged. You are now using cloud, meron ng on-demand artificial intelligence, meron ng extreme personalization and personal devices, or Uber-empowered. Technologies delivered by new technologies such as cloud and even Zoom and Google Classroom, etc. Sige, may I know, saan sa inyo anong state ngayon ni EVSU? Mga kaibigan. Are you over-empowered, work reimagined, current state, today but turbocharged? What do you think? Or what is your experience? Which of these scenarios best explain the current work in the university now? Can I hear a voice? Feel free to unmute. Anyone? Huwag po kayong mahiya. Di naman kailangan perfect, mga kaibigan. Current state, sabi ni MG Aruta. Ano pa? Meron bang current state? Current state lang? Current state pa rin, si Sir Bernie. Sige, anyone else? Wala pa kayong work reimagined? Today ba turbocharged? Current state, sabi ni Sir Renato. Okay, current state pa rin. Okay, meron ba sa inyong turbocharge na? Or work reimagined? Something like that? Wala pa. Okay, current state. Okay, sige. Thank you. Now, isip-isipin yung mabuti kung baka naman meron ng iba dyan na mix na. Actually, mga kaibigan, itong 4 scenarios na ito, sirs and ma'am, this was prepared in 2015 or 2016, based on drivers of change and the critical uncertainties they used in creating the 4 scenarios include democratization of work. So if low democratization, high democratization of work, and then they combined it with technological empowerment low technological empowerment versus high technological empowerment. And then they created the 4 scenarios based on that. No? So kaya mayroon silang 4 na scenarios. So which means based on your input sa EVSU, after more than 5 years or more than 6 years, nasa current state pa ang EVSU. Okay. But I'm sure some of you already have some kind of today but turbocharged type of scenario. No, kasi right now, for instance, we are not using traditional technologies. Tama? Hindi po tayo naka face-to-face. Next week pa tayo mag face-to-face. So we are now actually using cloud and other devices. Alright, so meron tayong konting today but turbocharged. So what we're saying is that scenarios of the future are like this. This is just an example. Based on previous data, we can see or we can come up with 4 scenarios of what might happen in the future. So pwedeng current state, the same as usual. Pwedeng work reimagined today but turbocharged or over-empowered. The idea is that if we are clear about the possible scenario that will happen, the question now is, what is our preferred future? Gusto nyo ba na current state pa rin? Or gusto nyo ba na today but turbocharged or over-empowered and so on? All right, so I hope that gives you an idea as a review, no, kung paano nga ba ginagawa yung mga scenarios na yan. Okay, next slide please. So scenario planning or scenario development as an approach for strategic foresight answers 3 questions. What will happen, or what is the plausible future? But given these plausible futures, what do we want to happen? Okay, what is our preferred future? And given these 2, we need also to understand and anticipate what might happen so that we are ready if the probable future will happen instead of the preferred future. All right, next slide. So there are principles of scenario planning, and these are the principles that we will discuss in detail now when we are having a face-to-face discussion later on. So the first one is outside-in thinking versus inside-out thinking. And the idea is that we use outside-in thinking, meaning we ask questions from people who are external to the university. Okay, which means that since we are familiar with the issues and concerns, now pwede naman nating tanungin ng ating sarili about what needs to be done for the university in the next 10 years. You know, we can ask our board of, we can ask the board, we can ask the university officials, we can ask the faculty, the administrators, etc. Pero yan po ay tinatawag natin na inside-out thinking. And inside-out thinking, as an example, is something like this. We know what is good for our students. We know what is good for our community. So that is why we come up with plans and programs based on what we think is good for our students, for their parents, for the community. That is inside-out thinking. Now, we are not using inside-out thinking alone. We need to use outside-in thinking, which means that we need to gather inputs from our clients, our customers, ask our students, our parents, our local officials, our industry, what is it that they want from the university. So, hindi lang natin tinatanong sarili natin what is good for our students, what is good for our clients, our customers. Outside in thinking is we are asking them what they think needs to be done so that FASU becomes an effective higher education institution in Eastern Visayas. Now, the other principle is we invite divergent, creative, and convergent thinkers. Kasi nga, ang default natin is cognitive bias. So, dapat meron tayong thinkers who are willing to think of different or imagine different scenarios. Kasi kung pare-pareho po tayong mag-isip, magiging prone tayo to herd mentality. So, kung anong sabihin ng isa, yun na rin ang sabihin ng lahat. And that is a cognitive bias, and we need to minimize that by inviting divergent, creative, and convergent thinkers. So yun ang isang challenge, no, in scenario planning. The other one is we focus on the long-term view. So as a guidance, we use a time cover horizon of at least 10 years. Okay, next slide, please. So the scenario development process, which we will go through in the face-to-face training, we answer the question, where are we now? So we identify the driving forces, katulad ng pag-identify natin ng strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So meron na kaming i-introduce na paraan kung paano siya gagawin using horizon scanning, so that we can identify the predetermined elements, the wildcards, and the critical uncertainties, which is part of step number 2. Where do we want to go, and what are the critical uncertainties or big types of risks that will affect our creation of the future? And then what will happen in the future? So these are the plausible scenarios that we need to develop. And after coming up with the plausible scenarios, we discuss the implications and options. And these are the implications and options that we can bring to the strategic planning process, so that we can triangulate the data that we gather from strategic planning with the data from strategic foresight scenario development. Okay, next slide, please. So what we will introduce, mga kaibigan, among others, kasi there are other tools and techniques in futures thinking and strategic foresight, we use the 7 steps, no, to developing scenarios. And we will begin with the strategic challenge or framing question. We call this step number 1, or framing challenge. Then we go to the driving forces. So we will guide you on how to identify the driving forces using horizon scanning. Then we identify the building blocks of the scenarios, which are basically the critical uncertainties. And then based on the critical uncertainties and the other driving forces, we use a scenario framework in order to come up with the plausible scenarios. And then we introduce step number 5, which is writing the scenario stories. Then based on steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we identify the implications and options together with the indicators and signposts, which you will use, you know, in revisiting or enhancing your strategic plan. Okay, before I end, maybe Ramel, you can show the video at this point. Walang audio. Sige, while waiting for the audio mga kaibigan, if you have any question, please feel free to put in the chat box so I can review and respond accordingly. Thank you.
May audio na ba, sir? Or wala pa?
Wala
Wala pong
pa.
audio.
Sige, we will provide copies of the slides to everyone here of the project team. Ramel, kailangan mong i-share yung audio sa kung anong ginamit mo na player.
Sige po, sir. Wait lang po.
Plan for the future. How do you plan for the future in a fast-changing world? While you might be right in forecasting that the near future will be quite similar, what about 10, 20, 30 years from now? Those are not the time horizon. Footprints just simply won't hold. and old rules may no longer apply. The past was riddled with too many bad decisions. Inventions, empires, and large-scale corporate organizations have fallen short in the test of time, not because the future could not be seen, but clearly getting to the bottom of how ordinary tales of the past have unfolded. We learn three very important lessons. The future is not determined. What we do today influences how the future might play out. Fortunately, there is scenario planning. This takes account to find the right path and embraces multiple futures that can be a potential reality in waiting. But why are we looking at the future from multiple lenses? As you said earlier, even if you try to predict the future, you might be reduced to a single course of action that may end up being the wrong one. Oftentimes, the road to the future gets constructed by playing new trends and forces. By virtue of anticipating multiple futures, we avoid the dangers of simplicity and one-dimensional thinking. Let's explore how scenario planning works with a simple example. The defining essence of the approach is the idea that there are many futures. You arrive at multiple plausible futures, and scenario planning extends a range of future assumptions. Based on the quantification of living and indicators, scenario planning blends creativity and imagination to create multiple plausible scenarios. This is done by considering three main phases: where we are now, where we want to go, and how to get there. Firstly, the first phase looks into the current state of affairs and promotes management of resources to increase future readiness. By looking underneath issues and trends impacting the future, scenario planning brings multiple stakeholders together to create an image of the future that captures the most relevant. The path to the future is a series of crossroads and intersections. Not the path to the right answers that allows us to undertake action to our eventual development by putting in place the dynamics of how multiple future scenarios might play out. The final phase sets out to design a flexible solution that will keep us competitive, agile, and relevant regardless of whichever future comes to pass. Simply, we must choose the right approach at the right time and stay tuned to changing environments. We are definitely better preparing than to improve the art.
Okay, thank you. So we will give you copies of the presentation materials and the video, of course, now for your reference. But if you have any question at this point, I would be glad to clarify anything that is not clear in our discussion. Thank you. Ramel?
Hi everyone. All right. Ayun, thank you so much, Doc Kahes. And we would like to invite everyone for opening this floor for some questions you have. I think Doc Alan is ready to cater to your questions for now. So baka may mga katanungan po kayo na baka hindi po kayo makatulog tonight. So please have this opportunity to ask Doc Alan for your queries or like mga comments niyo po. Thank you. So you can raise your hand or unmute yourself if you want to ask something. So from the EBSU community, we have almost 100 participants in this Zoom meeting, and we would like someone from the university to ask or maybe give some comments for Sir Alan's presentation about introduction to strategic foresight. So you can raise your hand or input or put your questions in sa chat box po natin kung medyo nahiya po tayo magtanong. And you can unmute yourself or just put your questions po. So Ma'am Lydia said, thank you, Sir Alan. That was a clear presentation. So I hope Miss Lydia, most of us were able to capture the learnings and the presentation of Doc Alan. And again, we would like to invite the people or our participants of EBSU. If you have some questions, please have it now, unmute yourself, or put it in the chat box before we are going to end the first session of our strategic foresight. So again, from the project team, the request of the EBSU participants for the presentation, and yes, expect later on for the copies of the presentation, at the same time the copies of the video. We would like to apologize for some technical issues encountered earlier about the video, but rest assured we're going to give you copies of that one after this webinar session. So if you don't have any more questions, I think may I see a hands or like an approve like icon dito sa Zoom natin kung naririnig or klaro pa ba yung mga instructions or mga sinasabi namin. Like a thumbs up lang po before we end the session. So someone raised his hand. Di ko lang sure if that's a approve or like a question. Pan-mute na lang po if ever. So I think ayun, we have some comments here from Sir Renato. Good morning. Earlier, the speaker asked if we have risk management plan. What we have is the risk and opportunities assessment. Doc Alan,
Okay, thank you, Sir Rene. That is one way of looking at driving forces, no, by assessing the risk and opportunities and coming up with the risk management plan or risk treatment plan and opportunities enhancement plan later on. So maybe we can discuss that further when I get a copy of the risk and opportunities assessment. Thank you. But that is already,
Sir Alan. Thank you very much.
so yun, thank you so much, Sir Renato and Doc Alan. Anything else from the EBSU community? Comments, question before we end the program po, and some final reminders for the next few days po. So I think before we end our the first day session, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone. Maraming salamat po EBSU community for participating and for finishing the first day of our strategic foresight webinar, and also to Doc Alan Kahis for that very insightful and very engaging activity for our introduction to strategic foresight. May pahabol si Miss Annabelle in the preparation of the risk management plan. May we know what could be included in particular daw po, Sir Alan?
we need the list of opportunities and risk or critical uncertainties. And then we come up with a risk assessment or risk analysis technique, to determine the likelihood and the consequence of the risk and opportunities. Then we can come up with the risk treatment strategies later on.
Ayun, thank you so much.
Pardon, sir. Pardon, sir.
Once you have the list of risk and opportunities, you need to go through, kasi yun po yung risk identification. You need to go through risk analysis so that you can determine or analyze the likelihood and the consequence levels of the risk and opportunities. And based on that analysis, you come up with the risk treatment strategy.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So wala na, and I think may ask everyone pala if you can, and if your data or your internet would permit, may you open your video na lang for a photo opportunity po to end our first day session on strategic foresight. Okay, for a while lang po. We'll just do the recording. Okay, first slide. Smile lang po tayo. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Smile lang po tayo hanggang fourth slide kasi di po ko sure kung saan po tayong slide or area po makukuha ng video. Okay, next one. Hold your beautiful faces and handsome faces. Next. Okay, and last one. Perfect. Ayun. Thank you so much, EVSU community, and congratulations on completing the first day of our webinar series. And this is just only the first day of our webinar session on strategic foresight. And I hope this will give you the drive and the energy to complete the session on strategic foresight, as we're going to finish the entire session up until Friday. And hopefully also for the participants for the bending reality that will happen on February 5 and 9. Sana maging ready po tayo through with the bending reality session through this webinar session. And again, congratulations everyone, and for completing the first day. And just some final reminders lang po. For tomorrow again, we're going to start the session at 8:30. Hopefully po we can start and begin on time tomorrow para earlier lang din po yung pagtatapos natin. So I think that's the end of our the first day session of our webinar series on strategic foresight. Again, maraming salamat po, and thank you so much, and see you tomorrow everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye po. Salamat po.
Thank you, Sir Richmond.
Thank
Sir
you very
Mark, thank you po.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless.
Morning. Thank you, sir.